You're listening to the Inspired Guide Podcast, episode 30. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Inspired Guide Podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Victoria, and today I have an interview with Andrea Owen. Andrea is an author, mentor, and certified life coach who helps high-achieving women let go of perfectionism, control, and isolation and choosing courage and confidence instead. How amazing does that sound? Today, during our conversation, Andrea and I talk all about how to manage your inner critic, talk to yourself more kindly, how to stop isolating and hiding out when things get rough, as well as the imposter complex. And we dive into what the imposter complex is and how to manage or how to overcome the imposter complex. So let's just jump right into the interview. And here's just a little bit more about Andrea before we get started. Andrea is also the author of 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life. And she's the new proud mama of the book, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, 14 Habits That Are Holding You Back from Happiness. So Andrea, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's lovely to have you here with me.
Oh, thank you for having me and for that lovely introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm excited because, well, you and I have been working together as virtual assistant and client for, oh my gosh, has it been over a year?
It has been a year, over a year, yeah.
Today we're interacting in a different way. So this should be a fun little conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So let's jump right in.
Okay.
In 2006, everything in your life basically just went completely upside down.
It was a rough year.
12 years later, things look completely different. You're an author of 2 books. You're a certified life coach. You're helping women on the road to courage and confidence. So how did you get from point A, total meltdown in 2006, to point B, where you are now?
Yeah, I think I love this question first and foremost. And I think it's the one that people are most curious about, whether the listeners have been in that place where, you know, it's a fall on their face moment, having the emotional crap kicked out of them, or they've just had these, you know, mini things that have, as we all have, these mini heartbreaks as our life goes on.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a lot of different tools and mentors and things that I have done over the last 12 years that I still continue to do, because I never think that we are arrived. I think we're always students of our own life. But I think that the biggest thing that I did when I picked myself up off the ground, literally picked myself up off the ground, not metaphorically, I had a couple of different moments during that year of just collapsing and crying and in hysterics. And I started to look at myself and my own patterns of behavior and thought, like, maybe it's me, you know, and granted, the men in my life had done some pretty awful things to me. I had been treated poorly, but at the end of the day, Darlene, you know, I had tolerated it. I had not listened to my intuition. I had not trusted myself. I didn't love myself. I was not compassionate with myself. I didn't have any coping mechanisms. I was treating myself poorly. So I was manifesting that, you know, in my life, but also it was a full-time job for me to make it look really good on the outside. And it just crumbled. It just finally one day came all crashing down.
Yeah. And what did that look like for you?
You mean like the story itself, the entertaining, dramatic story?
More of just like the crashing down portion of it and then the building back up.
Well, it was, you know, I'm not going to lie. It was complete and utter despair. And also, I think what kind of was the good part of that despair, you know, comes from the word desperation. And I became desperate to change my life because I wasn't going to stay there. You know, there was a part it had gotten so bad where I was just like, is this it? Like, am I going to stay here? And I knew obviously I would heal from it. It seemed so far away, but I was kind of done. Like, I drew a line in the sand and was just like, I can't continue this way anymore. And it was also partly, again, you know, to tell the complete truth, it was also humiliating and I had shame around where I was. So it happened when I was 31. And as everyone knows, that's kind of the area in our life where a lot of our friends are getting married and having babies and just like really kind of getting into the adulting part of life and, getting great jobs and getting promotions. And I was not like, so I was just humiliated about where I had ended up and like still going out and partying. And I'm like, oh God, my life was just a wreck. And I'm like watching it happen kind of, from the outside. And I decided no more. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I decided to kind of maybe try to trust myself for the first time that it was going to work out eventually. I didn't know how or with whom or when or on whose timeline, but I was willing to give it a try and throw everything I had at it.
Wow. You said a lot of amazing things in there, which actually relates to a lot of questions that I have for you today. But the one that I didn't plan for, you mentioned humiliation. And I know you work a lot with a lot of women. Is that something that comes up during your sessions or coaching or group coaching, the concept of humiliation and that underlying emotion?
I don't tend to help women who are in that place of where I was. That's a really low place. And I did not need a life coach at that point. I needed therapy.
Okay.
A lot of it. So I tend to help women who have been at that point in some time in their life and they've gone through that muck. And now they're at a place where like they want tools. But yeah, I've worked with a lot of women who've had some pretty monumental crap happen to them and they're ready to kind of unpack it and see what their part was in it and how they can learn from it to move forward.
And I love how you call it muck.
Like trudging through. Yeah.
Well, you also mentioned having to learn to talk better to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was reading something over the weekend and it really struck a chord with me. The author said, "You deserve an inner voice that speaks to you with care."
Mm-hmm.
And that deeply resonated with me. And I know you talk a lot about managing your inner critic, and you actually go into inner critic in your newest book. Can you talk a little bit about your inner critic and just explain one way we can talk more kindly to ourselves?
Yeah, I love that quote too. That is really beautiful. And, I work with women who range from their inner critic, their negative self-talk being their baseline, to high achieving, successful women who have bypassed that, but now they're hearing the voice sometimes of the imposter complex or, who do you think you are? Or they're afraid to go into creative endeavors or leave relationships because they're afraid of what might happen, etc. So it can look like a lot of different things. It's not necessarily always that just place of like beating yourself up constantly. I think it also comes from the women I work with and, and the women I don't work with, like the broad majority of women, I believe we have set very high expectations of ourselves. We now more than ever wear so many hats where the world is asking so much of us. And to shift gears, our attention is being demanded from so many different places. And it's overwhelming and we're tired. And then that kind of leads to more inner critic. So it's like this vicious cycle that I also want to say that I don't think that, I get women that come to me and say, they have a goal of, I want to eliminate my inner critic. I personally don't think that that's possible. I have yet to meet someone who doesn't have one, who has somehow eradicated it completely from their life. So I work with women and give them tools and strategies on how to manage it. That's what I say. Like, let's manage it. And one of those, like the very first thing that you need to do, which is quite often the most painful thing, is get really intimate with your inner critic. And what does it say to you? It's sometimes easier to break down areas of your life. So you might start with your career and then your intimate relationships, whether you're in a romantic relationship or you're single, then maybe it's your single life is an area of your life. If you're a parent, motherhood is an area of your life, or parenthood. Women tend to have a lot of negative self-talk around their body and appearance. It can be our number one trigger. And maybe your future goals are another area of your life, and your past experiences are another area of your life. Just pick one area. And what does your inner critic say about that? And you're not going to have, there might be some areas of your life where your inner critic doesn't really speak up that much, but you can't fix what you don't know isn't working. So it's helpful to start there, albeit painful.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that like a lot of people are listening or thinking, oh my gosh, like I have to pick just one.
Yeah, I have so much. Yeah.
So you mentioned the imposter complex, and that
Mm-hmm.
interests me so much. It's a topic of conversation that comes up between myself and one of my friends so often. Can you describe what the imposter complex is? Because some people are probably listening and going, well, I don't know what you're talking about, Darlene and
Yeah.
Andrea. So
Uh-huh.
can you explain a little bit more about the imposter complex? Why don't we start there?
It's definitely like a sister of the inner critic. It's a specific part of our fear and our inner critic. And what it looks like is feeling like a fraud. That feeling of, like I was saying, like, who do you think you are? Also, what tends to happen is, maybe someone's in a job and they think to themselves, when is everybody going to find out that I really have no idea what I'm doing? So it's also, women tend to do this a lot, like undermine their qualifications and experience, or chalk up their accomplishments and accolades even to either luck or somebody helping them get there, or a glitch in the system, or it's really not owning where you're at in your accomplishments and your successes. Imposter complex seems to happen a lot at work. If you kicked ass at work and saved your team a bunch of money, or you doubled your sales in the quarter or something like that, and in the meeting you're like, we did, and and you're saying like, and say you did most of the work, and you're saying it was merely a 13% increase. Kevin helped a ton, and Kevin like didn't really help a ton. It's being in that massive discomfort of actually owning your stuff. So, for instance, I love to give the example of Cha-Cha DiGregorio from the movie Grease. I had a podcast episode about her because ever since I was a child, she's been my favorite Grease character. I know she's an uncommon favorite. She's not typically people's favorite. And I truly think it's because as a culture, we are not comfortable with women owning their brilliance and being that confident. And obviously, this particular character in the movie or play is over the top. But if we just look at it from a symbolic standpoint, so she meets these people for the first time at this dance and basically tells them that she is the best dancer at her school. Like, can you imagine if we did that? If we walked around and met somebody and you're like, hi, my name is Darlene. I'm the best podcaster in the United States. Like that is, we're just like, what? And then she just owns the dance floor. She knows she's a great dancer. There is no inkling at all that she thinks that she's not the greatest. Like, she honestly, genuinely thinks that she is the greatest dancer. And then when she wins the hand jive, thing that's going on, she snatches the trophy out of the teacher's hand. She doesn't accept it humbly. She snatches it out of her hand and then waves it around as a symbol of like, of course I won this, like, and just is embracing it. So to me, that is like, if we could all just have a quarter of Cha-Cha's confidence and the way that she embraces her talents, the world would be a different place. So again, like, I think I think it does start with the quote unquote, the system, that we are uncomfortable with women leadership, and we are uncomfortable with women embracing their strengths and successes. I'm like, oh my God, this woman just embodies confidence and courage and ownership and leadership. Like, let's just take just a spoonful of what she has to offer.
So everyone, if you're listening and thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about the movie Grease or the character or the scene you're referencing, first, really?
I know. Are you even like, do you live in this country?
Yeah. And then second, what I'll do is put a link to the video clip that we're referencing here in this episode's show notes.
Yeah, there's a couple of clips of her from that scene on YouTube, and I just feel like, that movie is like an American staple. So like, most people know who she is.
Totally. So I kind of want to turn to a topic that seems a bit hard to discuss. Well, all right, maybe it's a hard topic for me to discuss because it's usually my go-to mechanism, and it's isolating and hiding out. Yeah. So the question is, why do women use isolating and hiding out when we're going through some kind of struggle? And then what is one way we can move away from doing so?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. One, just off the top of my head, I think that we are more connected now than ever with the internet and social media, but we are more disconnected than ever because we feel like we're accomplishing something by collecting friends on these social media platforms. And I think that it comes down to the basics of vulnerability. To actually reach out for help when you are in struggle is extremely vulnerable. It's risky. You get to a certain age where you've probably had an experience where you have done that, where you have risked it, and somebody disappoints you. They don't show up for you. And I don't necessarily mean showing up like saying that they're going to be somewhere and they show up. I mean, sometimes, say you share something really hard and vulnerable with someone. And, I have this whole list of different ways that people kind of mess it up. And, you can have the one-upper, the one who says like, oh my gosh, Darlene, that's nothing. Let me tell you what happened to me last weekend with my kids. The person who tells you you're exaggerating, the person who might make it about them. And there's just all these different ways where you can feel disappointed. And then, then you don't feel seen and heard, you feel worse. Or the person who, I had this person in my life for a long time that was really close to me. The person who I would share something really hard with, and they would feel so upset for me. I ended up having to make them feel better. They were just like taken down by it. None of that is helpful at all. So that's one reason that we don't. And then another reason is that we just feel alone. And when we're in struggle, it can feel really lonely. And then we tell ourselves, nobody else has these problems. I don't want to bother so-and-so with that problem because you're embarrassed or ashamed, or there's a multitude of things that we tell ourselves so that it influences our hiding and isolating. And now that we have Netflix and things like that, we have a lot of distractions in the internet, and there's a lot of different things that we can do to distract ourselves that make excuses for. So that's why we don't do it. Is a perspective. So if you look at it like a perspective, like we were just talking about with Cha-Cha, like you look at it from a few different angles. So yes, we've all had that feeling of I don't want to bother somebody. So if you have a good friend who would genuinely be bothered by your reaching out for help, they are not your friend. Let's just get that out of the way. They are like, if they are consistently bothered and feel burdened by your humanness, like you're just like the stuff that happens to us, the human experience, then you need to, that's actually the problem. Then you need to go and try to nurture different friendships or have a conversation with that person. And I think also, if you turn the tables on yourself, and if you have a good friend and you found out they were having that conversation with, their therapist or something, and saying like, I don't want to bother Darlene. She has a baby, and I'm just going to, keep it all inside and lock it away because she's got so much other stuff. Like, you'd be kind of upset,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. You'd be like, what do you mean you didn't come to me? Like, how could you not have told me? So it's sort of like, if my friend said that about me, I would feel offended. And I mean, do you not think I can show up for you? Like, how can I support? Have I done something in the past that's made you feel like you're unsupported? And just, again, so it's like, it's all about perspective. And you can also preface the conversation and say, I have this thing happening and I'm really, fill in the blank of whatever feeling you're having, embarrassed, ashamed, worried, anxious about it. And do you have like 15 minutes to listen to me? I don't need you to fix it. I don't need anything else, just for you to hear this. That's really scary. Like, I get that is scary. I'm someone who didn't trust people for a long time, pretty much my whole life. And it's something that I've been learning over the last 6 or 7 years. So I get it. And it's not always going to go perfectly. You are going to have experiences that don't work out as you want them to. But the answer will always be no if you don't try.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And, it's funny. I just recently had a friend who sent me a phone message, and she was venting about something going on in her life. And then the next day she says to me, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to unload that on you.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. I'm your friend. That's what I'm here for. So don't ever apologize for something you're saying. to me in the moment of,
Yeah.
you needing a friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. And I'm glad that you had that conversation with her instead of just like jumping over it and not saying anything about it, because that's what Brene Brown has coined, the vulnerability hangover. When we share something with someone and either as it's coming out of our mouth or the next day, we're like, oh my God, that was too much. You just want to take it back because you're worried about how that other person is going to respond. And I'm super glad that you said that and said like, no, this is what friendship is. And you don't ever have to apologize for sharing. Like, more, please, more, please.
We don't need to edit. You don't need to
Mm-hmm.
edit yourself for me. You need to vent. Go for it.
For sure. Yeah, I love that.
So earlier you mentioned technology, Netflix, and social media and all of that, how it's easy to use as a way to isolate.
Mm-hmm.
Technology and media and everything else around us actually makes it easy to compare ourselves with others, which also puts a whole bunch of other icky feelings right in front of our faces.
Yeah.
Like comparing ourselves to the so-called Joneses.
Damn those Joneses.
Yeah. So why do we compare and despair so damn much?
Well, I think that, one of the things I hate about self-help is that there's a lot of advice out there that's very black or white. And one of those is to stop comparing yourselves to others. Comparison, stop comparing and you'll find your happiness. And people feel like they're doing it wrong because they can't stop comparing themselves. I truly think it's part of the human experience. I think that I don't know the brain science around it. I wish I did, but I do think that it is something that we just do biologically as some kind of survival mechanism that goes way back to our old lizard brains. And again, like it's like the inner critic, like you can't completely get rid of it, but you can learn to manage it. And one of the things that I teach people to do is manage your triggers. Like, if I wrote about this in the book, like how I had followed all these fitness people on Instagram because my intention was that I would use these. I don't know what I was thinking. Like I was going to do the videos that a lot of them posted. Like, does anyone do that? Like, I don't know. And I don't know anyone who's like, I follow this person on Instagram and I do her 30-second videos and that's my workout. Like, I don't know anyone that actually does that. I think it's just mostly for marketing. So that was my plan originally. And then I found myself scrolling through my Instagram feed, feeling crappy about myself. And that was why, because I was comparing my lack of fitness, my body, my life, and then I was like making up stories about my life compared to theirs. And it just gets out of hand. It quickly can escape from you. So one of the things I ask people to do is like, look at what you're consuming. Are you consuming, even if you think that they're, positive people in your life, is it actually making you feel worse because you're making up stories about your life? And then also watch the stories that you're making up. That's huge. That can change your life, just being aware of what you are telling yourself based on what you are comparing yourself and seeing online.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Such hard stuff. So I want to move on and talk about a chapter in your book. It's the last chapter. And actually, more specifically, there's a couple of lines from that chapter that I wanted to read because they really resonated with me. And then I'll ask you the question that relates to what I'm about to read.
Okay.
So you wrote, "It's fine to fall apart sometimes. You trust yourself enough to know that even if you fall back on these habits, it'll be short-lived and you'll come out okay on the other side of the fire. That you'll treat yourself with grace and tenderness and do your best, because that's all we can ever do." And Andrea, that really just resonated with me. And to me, when I read your words or hear your podcasts or see your content, you just speak so loudly with your passion for the topic and your message for women. It's just so important to you. And I'd love for you to tell me why. Why is that message so important for you to spread? I'd really love to know why.
I think, there's a lot of different answers there. I think that part of why I started blogging in 2008 was, it honestly, I won't lie, it started out as a way for me to kind of get everything out, and it was therapeutic and journaling. And I was like, this sounds like fun. And then it quickly turned into something else. And then I kept writing and kept writing more personal things, because even when I got the advice of a mentor not to, I'm so glad I didn't listen, because I wanted people to not feel so alone. I think that coming from my background and how I used to be and feeling really lonely, you know, being surrounded by a lot of people, but still feeling really lonely and not knowing why. And then, you know, as my life started to change, I started to realize why and started to change my own patterns and behaviors so I don't feel so alone anymore. That's what's really kept me going and kept me, that really is at the end of the day, Darlene, like that's my why of, I just want people in general, and specifically because I work with women, to feel less alone. I again, like there's more people on this planet than ever. I was at a museum in New York, and there was it was like the Natural History Museum. It's taken us 200 years to go from it was like 200,000 people on the planet to what are we at, like 7 billion or something like that. It's something crazy like that. We had this just like we've had this enormous jump in people on the planet, but yet so many people struggle and feel so incredibly alone. And like, why is that? So I have found by simply telling my stories and telling the truth about my human experiences makes people feel less alone. Like, is it that easy? Like, if it's that easy, I'm just going to keep doing it. That's really all I'm doing. And it's super awesome that I can make money along the way and support my family and support, you know, jobs for other women. And that's really at the end of the day what it's all about.
Yeah, I love that. It actually leads me into the final question. And so I want you to imagine that there's actually someone sitting in front of you, a woman, and all she wants to do is live a happier and more empowering life. But she just feels in her heart that she wants to do something amazing in the world. But she's immobile. And she can't do it. She feels alone. So picture her in front of you. What would you say to her?
Well, first I would have so many questions, but that's not an option. Okay. What I would say is that you have to do the work.
Yeah.
I think that, and you know, I don't know a lot about this person, but what I can guess, and I see this a lot in my community, is they like the idea of changing their life. They like it in theory. And that's who I was for a long, long time. And it wasn't until I actually became proactive and took action, and bigger action than actually reading the books and listening to the podcasts and attending the workshops, like actually doing the work that is involved, answering the questions at the end of chapters in self-help books, using the tools I learned in podcasts, like those types of things, like doing the hard work, because that is not easy. Nicole Antoinette, my friend, she says, in order to change your life, you have to change your life. And I think, again, people like to consume everything and listen to things like this, but they don't actually do any of the work. And that's not to blame and shame people. It really is, you know, a wake-up call and just the hard truth of actually what living your best life actually is. So that's what I would probably be most curious about.
Well, I was going to say before, when you said you had so many questions to ask, I was going to say, well, ask away, but I don't know the answers either because she's just an imaginary woman.
This hypothetical person.
Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate that you came on the podcast. So before we finish up, I want to give you the opportunity, Andrea, to tell everybody where and how they can go and find you on the web and all of that good stuff and learn more about you. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, my dear. Best way to find me is at yourkickasslife.com. I hang out a lot on Instagram, same handle at yourkickasslife. And then I'm excited because starting on February 5th, I'm going to be doing daily podcast episode. And it's just really so randomly worked out that it starts on episode 200. We did not plan that. It just started. So episode 200 to 219, they're going to be daily podcast episodes. I'm excited about the content because I'm telling a story of my own up-leveling during my last book launch and what that looked like for me and the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it was not all perfect. There were some hard moments in there. And and there's worksheets for people to actually do the work like I was talking about.
Awesome.
So I'm excited for that.
Well, I'll have links to where people can go to listen to your February episodes and all of your podcast episodes, as well as information on your latest book and all that great stuff. So Andrea, thank you again for being my guest. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I'm just so thrilled that you came on my show.
Oh, thank you so much, Darlene. I love you, and I love talking about this really, really important stuff. So thank you. It's been my pleasure.
That wraps up this episode of the Inspired Guide podcast. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you again, Andrea, for being my guest. If you would like to learn more about Andrea and find links to all of the great stuff that we chatted about in this episode, head on over to dvpodcasts/inspired and look for episode 30's show notes. Well, that does it for this week. And so I will be back next month with a brand new interview episode. Now, if you're looking for more podcasting and you're just like, Darlene, one podcast isn't enough. What are you doing? Head on over to Wham's Rock. That's WAHMS rock.com. And I'm producing a bi-weekly episodic podcast with my dear friend Jennifer on all things work at home mom life. And we produce those episodes twice a month. So theoretically, you actually have 3 episodes of podcasts that you can tune into if you are so moved to do so. So again, that's whamsrock.com. We also have a Facebook community, so you can join us if you're a work-at-home mom or a woman working from home on a business of some kind. You can find that by going to whamsrock.com/Facebook, and you can always connect with me. I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Facebook at facebook.com/DarleneVictoriaWork. And you can also, if you're interested in being a guest or dropping me a line or suggesting a topic or guest to me, go to dvpodcasts.com and look for the contact link and reach out to me there. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am so happy that you come back and listen to me time and again, and I'm just grateful for you. This wraps up this month's episode, and I just wanted to remind you, after everything is said and done, remember to be inspired by the most important person in your life, you. Take care, everybody, and I will be back next time. This is Darlene Victoria, signing out.